My name is Amara, and this is a story I don't tell often, but it's one that shaped me, truly shaped me. It's about a day, a speech, and a silence that was louder than any words. It all started, I guess, with David. David was, well, he was sunshine. He had this easy laugh, kind eyes, and he saw me, really saw me, when a lot of people didn't. We met in a college literature class. He was smart, funny, and didn't seem to notice or care that I was one of the few black students in our predominantly white university, or that I came from a side of town that people like his family probably only drove through with their doors locked. His family, that's where the knot in this story tightens. David was so excited for me to meet them. "They're gonna love you, Amara," he'd say, his blue eyes sparkling. I wasn't so sure. I'd met families like his before, polite on the surface, but with an undercurrent, a little chill you couldn't quite name but definitely felt. The first dinner was at their big, beautiful house. White picket fence, perfectly manicured lawn, the whole 9 yards. His mom, Susan, was polite enough, offering me sweet tea and asking about my major. His dad, Robert, was quieter, mostly observing, but it was his Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark who really set the tone. "So, Amara," Aunt Carol began, her voice a little too bright, "David tells us you're quite the student." I smiled, a little nervously. "I try my best. I'm aiming for a good GPA." Uncle Mark chuckled, a dry rustling sound. "Good for you. Important to have hobbies." Hobbies. Like my education, the thing I was pouring my heart and soul into was just a little pastime. David squeezed my hand under the table, a silent apology. Over the next few months, there were more dinners, more gatherings, and more little comments. They weren't overtly racist, not usually. It was more subtle. Questions about my people, surprise when I knew about classical music or obscure European history. Little jokes that weren't quite jokes. Once, when David mentioned I was at the top of our advanced calculus class, Uncle Mark had clapped him on the back and said, "Well, son, looks like you found yourself a real unicorn." He'd boomed with laughter, and Aunt Carol had tittered along. I just smiled weakly, feeling my cheeks burn. A unicorn, as if a black girl excelling in calculus, was a mythical creature. The worst of it, the moment that still makes my stomach clench, happened about 6 months before graduation. We were at a big family barbecue. David was off playing frisbee with his younger cousins. I was trying to make small talk with Aunt Carol, who was telling a long, rambling story about her garden club. Then, David's grandpa, a gruff old man I hadn't interacted with much, piped up from his lawn chair. "So, David tells me you're doing well in school, girl." "Yes, sir," I said politely. "I'm working hard." "Valedictorian," he says, Uncle Mark chimed in, a smirk playing on his lips. He'd clearly overheard David proudly telling someone earlier. Aunt Carol stopped her story. Her eyes widened, not with pride for me, but with something else. Disbelief? Amusement? "Oh, Mark, don't be silly," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "Valedictorian? That's quite a claim." "Well, is it true?" Grandpa asked, squinting at me. I felt a familiar heat creep up my neck. "I'm in the running, yes. My grades are very high." I tried to keep my voice steady, and then it happened. Uncle Mark let out a short, sharp laugh. Aunt Carol joined in, a higher-pitched giggle. Even David's mom, Susan, cracked a smile, though hers seemed a bit more uncertain. Robert, his dad, just sort of grunted. "Valedictorian," Uncle Mark repeated, wiping a tear from his eye as if it were the funniest joke he'd heard all year. "Oh, that's a good one. You got ambition, I'll give you that, girl." Aunt Carol patted my arm, her touch condescending. "It's good to dream big, dear. But let's be realistic, shall we?" My heart felt like it had dropped into my shoes. Realistic? What did she mean, realistic? that someone who looked like me couldn't possibly achieve that. The laughter, light and airy to them, felt like tiny, sharp needles pricking my skin. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run. But I just stood there, a polite, strained smile plastered on my face. David came back then, sensing the weird vibe. "What's so funny?" he asked. "Oh, nothing, son," Uncle Mark said, still chuckling. "Just talking about Amara's big plans." David looked at me, then at them, a frown creasing his forehead. He knew. He knew they were being awful, even if he didn't know the exact words. He took my hand. "Amara is going to be valedictorian," he said, his voice firm. "She's the smartest person I know." His family just exchanged knowing glances, the kind that said, "Oh, young love, so naive." That night, I cried in David's arms. "They don't think I can do it," I sobbed. "They think because I'm black, I'm not smart enough, not capable enough." They laughed, David. They actually laughed at me. He held me tight, stroking my hair. "They're idiots, Amara. They're ignorant. Don't let them get to you. You are brilliant. You will be valedictorian. And you'll show them. You'll show them all." His words were a balm, but the wound was deep. Their laughter echoed in my ears for weeks. It fueled a fire in me, though. A painful, angry fire, but a fire nonetheless. I would not just be valedictorian. I would be the best valedictorian they had ever seen. Not for them, not really. But for me. For every little black girl who was ever told her dreams were unrealistic. The next 6 months were a blur of late nights, endless studying, caffeine, and sheer willpower. I barely slept. I triple-checked every assignment. I lived in the library. My own family, my mom especially, was my rock. "You got this, baby girl," she'd tell me over the phone, her voice warm and steady. "Don't you let anyone tell you what you can or can't do. You show the world who Amara is." David was incredible. He'd bring me coffee, quiz me on flashcards, and just sit with me in silence while I worked, a comforting presence. He never once doubted me. He also started standing up to his family more directly. There were a few tense phone calls, a couple of strained family dinners he attended alone because I couldn't bear to face them. He told me he was drawing lines, making it clear their attitudes weren't acceptable. I appreciated it, but the damage was done. The laughter still rang in my ears. A week before graduation, the official letter came. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Dear Ms. Amara Johnson, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as the class of 20XX valedictorian." I burst into tears, a mix of joy, relief, and a strange sort of vindication. I called my mom first, then David. They both screamed with delight. Then came the hard part, the speech. What would I say? How could I possibly convey everything I was feeling? I thought about Aunt Carol's condescending pat, Uncle Mark's booming laugh. I thought about the unicorn comment. I thought about being realistic. I wrote and rewrote. I practiced in front of the mirror, my voice shaking at first, then growing stronger. I didn't want it to be an angry speech or a bitter one. I wanted it to be me. Honest, hopeful, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit challenging. Graduation. Day arrived, hot and sunny. My family was there. Mom, Dad, my little brother, my grandma, all beaming with pride. Their faces were a sea of love and support in the huge crowd. David found me before the ceremony, his eyes shining. He hugged me tight. "You look amazing, and you're going to be amazing." "His family is here," I whispered, my stomach churning. "I know," he said softly. "Just focus on what you need to do. Focus on your moment." I saw them as we graduates filed in. Susan, Robert, Aunt Carol, and Uncle Mark, sitting a few rows back. Aunt Carol gave a tight little wave. Uncle Mark looked uncomfortable. Or maybe I was just imagining it. The ceremony dragged on. Speeches from deans, professors. Then, the dean of students approached the podium. And now, it is my distinct honor to introduce our class of 20XX Valedictorian, a student of exceptional intellect, perseverance, and character, Ms. Amara Johnson. A wave of applause. I saw my mom dabbing her eyes. I took a deep breath and walked to the podium. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst. I adjusted the microphone, my hands slightly clammy. I looked out at the sea of faces, thousands of them. I found my family. I found David, giving me a thumbs up. And then my eyes found them. Aunt Carol, Uncle Mark, Susan, and Robert. Aunt Carol had a polite, fixed smile. Uncle Mark was looking down at his program, almost like he was trying to avoid eye contact. I cleared my throat. Good morning, esteemed faculty, proud parents, distinguished guests, and fellow graduates of the class of 20XX. My voice came out clearer than I expected. I started with the usual thanks, the reflections on our shared journey, the late night, study sessions, the friendships forged. I kept my tone light, warm. I saw some of David's family relax a little. Maybe they thought it would be a generic, forgettable speech. Then I shifted. Growing up, I said, my voice dropping a little, becoming more personal. I was often told, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly, what my limits were. What was realistic for someone like me. I'm sure many of you here today have faced similar moments. Moments when someone else's perception of you tried to define your potential. I paused. I could feel the shift in the atmosphere. I didn't look directly at David's family. Not yet. There were times when the path felt incredibly steep, when the doubts, both external and internal, felt deafening. Times when it would have been easier to scale back my dreams, to aim for something safer, something more believable in the eyes of others. I saw Aunt Carol's smile falter. Uncle Mark was now looking straight at me, his expression unreadable. But what I learned, what this institution and the people who truly supported me taught me, is that our dreams don't have limits unless we give them limits. Our potential is not defined by other people's expectations, their prejudices, or their laughter. There it was. Laughter. I let the word hang in the air for a moment. It is defined by our courage, our resilience, our willingness to work harder than anyone thought possible. It's defined by our refusal to be silenced or made small. I took a breath, my gaze sweeping across the audience. And this time, I let my eyes rest, just for a second, on David's family. Aunt Carol was no longer smiling. Her face was pale. Uncle Mark looked like he'd been slapped. His mouth was slightly open. Susan had her hand over her own mouth, her eyes wide. Robert was staring, motionless. To my fellow graduates, I continued, my voice ringing with conviction, as we step out into the world, remember this. Do not let anyone else write your story. Do not let their fears, their biases, or their disbelief dim your light. Be bold. Be audacious. Chase the dreams that others might call unrealistic. Prove them wrong. Not with anger, but with your success. Not with bitterness, but with your brilliance. Let your achievements be the answer. Let your joy be the testament. And when you encounter those who doubt you, those who might even laugh at your aspirations, I paused again, feeling the weight of that word. Let your response be to stand taller, to work harder, and to shine so brightly that their shadows cannot reach you. I spoke about the future, about hope, about the responsibility we had to make the world a more inclusive, understanding place. I ended with a quote from Maya Angelou about rising. When I finished, there was a moment of stunned silence. Just a beat. And then the applause started. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was thunderous. People were on their feet. My own family was cheering, tears streaming down my mom's face. David was whistling, his face alight with pride. And David's family? They were sitting, stock still, speechless. Aunt Carol looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her carefully constructed composure had crumbled. Her face was a mixture of shock and something else. Shame? Uncle Mark was staring blankly ahead, his earlier bravado completely gone. He looked deflated, small. Susan was openly crying, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Robert just looked down at his hands in his lap. They didn't clap. Not at first. They just sat there, frozen, as the ovation roared around them. Later, at the reception, my family enveloped me in hugs. Friends congratulated me. Teachers shook my hand. It was overwhelming, wonderful. David finally managed to push through the crowd. He just grabbed me and kissed me, right there in front of everyone. That was the most incredible speech I have ever heard, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. You were magnificent. And then I saw them approaching. Aunt Carol, Uncle Mark, Susan, and Robert. They looked hesitant, awkward. My protective instincts flared, and I instinctively braced myself. David put a reassuring arm around my waist. Susan reached me first. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Amara, she said, her voice trembling. Your speech was, She couldn't seem to get the words out. Robert stepped forward, his face grim. Amara, he said, his voice gruff but low. We owe you an apology, a profound apology. Aunt Carol was next. She looked genuinely distraught. The condescension was gone, replaced by a raw, uncomfortable humility. Amara, dear, she began, her voice barely a whisper. We were wrong. So wrong. What you said about laughter, about being realistic. She trailed off, looking down. I am so deeply ashamed, and so very sorry. Uncle Mark was the last. He looked physically uncomfortable, like the words were being dragged out of him. Yeah, he mumbled, not quite meeting my eye. What they said. We misjudged. Badly. He finally looked up, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes. That wasn't arrogance or amusement. It looked like genuine regret. You're quite something, young lady, quite something. I didn't know what to say. A part of me, the hurt, angry part, wanted to lash out, to say, yes, I am. No thanks to you. But looking at their faces, seeing their genuine discomfort and shame, something else rose in me. Not forgiveness, not yet. But maybe understanding? Or at least a weariness of the fight. Thank you, I said quietly. I appreciate you saying that. It wasn't an absolution, and they knew it, but it was an acknowledgement. Susan reached out and tentatively touched my arm. This time, it didn't feel condescending. It felt pleading. We hope in time you can forgive us. David loves you very much, and we would like to get to know the real you. The magnificent you we saw up there today. I just nodded. Words failed me then. The rest of the day was a celebration, but that quiet, awkward exchange stayed with me. Their silence during the applause, their fumbling apologies. It was a victory of sorts. Not a gloating victory, but a somber one. It was the sound of prejudice cracking, of deeply ingrained biases being confronted head-on, not by anger, but by irrefutable truth and grace. Things didn't magically become perfect with David's family overnight. It was a slow process. There were more awkward conversations, more tentative steps. Aunt Carol started asking me genuine questions about my life, my interests, my family. Uncle Mark, bless his heart, even tried to discuss a book he'd read by a Black author, clearly making an effort. It wasn't always smooth, but it was a start. They were trying. David and I stayed together, Our bond, forged in shared dreams and strengthened by adversity, was strong. He never stopped being my biggest champion. Sometimes late at night, when I'm working on my next big project, my next unrealistic dream, I still hear the echo of their laughter. But it's fainter now. It's drowned out by the memory of the applause, by the pride in my mother's eyes, by David's unwavering love, and by the profound, stunned silence of a family that finally saw me, not as a stereotype, not as a unicorn, but as Amara, the valedictorian, the woman who left them speechless, and in doing so perhaps, just perhaps, opened their minds a little wider. And that, I've come to realize, is a story worth telling. Not just for me, but for anyone who's ever been underestimated. Your voice matters. Your dreams matter. And sometimes, the most powerful statements are made not in the noise, but in the silence that follows when truth finally speaks.